Well, once again, good afternoon. Pastor Hayton with the Lower Lights Devotional. This is Friday. The week has just whizzed right on by. And each day this week, and the last couple of weeks or so, we've been sharing with you tidbits from the life of my father, A.L. Hayton. And so I want to continue on with that today. Last evening, we left off with how Dad had gone up on the hillside there out of Chapmanville, West Virginia. Knew that his time to leave Chapmanville was there, and so he went up to seek direction from the Lord. Lord, where do you want me to go? And as he was kneeling in prayer, he heard the train coming through Chapmanville, heard the whistle blowing, and he knew that daily mail would be on that train. And the Lord spoke to him, get up off your knees, go down to the village, go to the post office, and there in that post office box you will find a letter telling you where you need to go for the next chapter of your ministry. Well, Dad went down, and as he watched the postmaster put the mail away, sure enough, there was an envelope that appeared through the little glass in the door of the post office box, and Dad opened it, and it was from someone. Wish I knew just who had written that letter, but I don't. But someone had gotten a hold of Dad's name and wrote him a letter asking him to come be their pastor out in Natoma, Kansas. Now, Natoma was almost 1,200 miles away, and how were we going to get there? My dad had bought a car in Chapmanville, but it wasn't a very reliable car, and he was afraid to make the move in that. And so once again, he began praying. Let me allude to my memoirs here, perhaps to save me from rambling too much. But after receiving the letter, the Lord had told my dad would be in the morning mail. Plans were made for leaving West Virginia and moving to north central Kansas, a town of 700 residents called Natoma. Well, there was a pastor up in the hills out of Huntington, up in a place called Ashford. Clifford Lee and my dad were friends. And arrangements were made for him to move us out to Kansas. He had a brand new 1948 Nash. Now you're wondering how a family of 6, plus the driver, could move across the country in a small passenger car. Well, we did it. I remember boxes of our possessions were in the trunk, and in boxes on the floor between the front and rear seats. A pallet of sorts spanned the back seat, and boxes that is where we 4 children rode for a distance of nearly 1,200 miles. Dad and Mom and Brother Lee in the front seat. Well, I was 5 years old in 1948, so I don't remember too much about that trip. I did share in my memoirs that memory or two from that trip, but going on here, the drive must have been straight through. As we arrived in Natoma very early one morning, Dad and Brother Lee walked across the railroad track that ran in front of the church, knocked on the door of a couple whose name was Newton. I assume they fed us breakfast, although I really don't remember anything else about that first day. But life was beginning for us in Natoma, Kansas. Dad moved his family from the rugged hills of West Virginia to the rolling hills of north central Kansas, and we were away from all of our kinfolk, our grandparents, our aunts, uncles, and cousins. It was all kind of a lonely feeling, knowing that we were going to be so far from relatives, but I'm so glad that was typical of my dad. Wherever God led him to go, he was willing to go. I made a cassette tape that I'd made from a couple sermons that he preached on life experiences, and that's where I'm recalling a lot of stuff from this, and I entitled that Willing Obedience, because that's typical of my dad. He was willing to go far from home, to people that he didn't know, country that he'd never been in, and yet that's typical of the guy that I call my dad. Well, I'll continue to talk about Natoma for another time or two. We'll see you Monday here on the Lower Lights Devotional with Pastor Hayton. Goodbye now. God bless.